So today we'll be learning how to make an off-shoulder bustier. It's going to be a beginner-friendly tutorial, okay? And a beginner can comprehend very easily. So if you're here to subscribe, please don't forget to do that and then hit on the bell icon. So I'll just quickly explain these lines in brief and then we can proceed from there. So that's the neckline, and then we have the shoulder line here. Okay, we have the pattern unfold, so we're going to be taking half the shoulder, okay, and the neckline is the normal standard. That's the three midpoints of the shoulder seam there, extending towards the bust point, okay. So I'm going to label this line the bust line rather, and then this is the under bust line, and then we have our waistline there, and then below the waistline is the seam allowance. And the seam allowance for this pattern is 1 inch, okay. So the line over there is the armhole line, which is established on the chest line, okay. The armhole is established on the chest line, okay. So the next thing we'll simply do is the major part of this tutorial, which is the under bust tightening and the over bust tightening, okay. So what I'll simply do here is to on the bust line there, I'll come down by 0.5 inch, okay. And then on the under bust line, I'll move towards the center front by 0.5 inch, and then towards the side front by 2 inches, okay. So I'll be moving towards the side front by 2 inches. So basically you just play around this contouring, because you can actually place your 2 inches on one side. You can tighten your under bust on one side, basically just placing your 2 inches towards the side front, okay. Or you can tighten on both sides, which is the center front and the side front as well. So just play around this pattern drafting. So I simply went ahead to establish the same measurements on the waistline and the seam allowance, and I linked up the points together. So guys, if you notice that while contouring, I linked up this line, just watch me closely, you see what I'm doing. I'm going to be linking up this line to a 0.25 inch point on the bust line, away from the bust point, okay. Okay, so it's just 0.25 inch away from the bust point. So I simply linked that line up there, okay. So I'll go ahead and also connect tighten the underside of the other side of the under bust, okay. So this will be extending straight to the bust point itself, okay. So this is it for the under bust tightening. So simply go ahead and tighten the over bust here. So on the shoulder line, I'll be coming down by 4 inches, okay. So you could go ahead to establish your off shoulder above or below 4 inches. So just do what works for you. Okay guys, so on that same point, I'll move towards the side front, the center front by 1/2 inch, and then towards the side front by 1.5 inches. So I'm tightening with 2 inches, okay. The dart intake for the over bust is 2 inches, 1/2 inch towards the center front, and then 1.5 inches towards the side front, okay. And then I'll go ahead to link it up to the bust point. The dart on the on the center front will be linked to the bust point, and while the dart on the dart intake on the side front will be linked to the 0.5 inch point away from the bust point. So just watch me and I'm sure you understand what I'm doing. So guys, this is it. You can go ahead to blend the bust curve over there if there's need for it, but this is curvy enough. I don't think there'll be need for that. Okay, so what we'll simply do, so I'll be using my pattern master to square up that over bust there towards the center front. Okay, so I'll be squaring it up with my pattern master. Okay, so for more accuracy, or for accuracy rather, you can go ahead to use your set square. Okay, okay guys, so I'll be explaining intensively here, so I just really need you to pay attention very well here. So this line here is measuring 4.5 inches. Okay, and then our shoulder measurement is 15 inches, and since we have our pattern on fold, 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. Okay, so simply have in mind that our dart intake, like I mentioned earlier, is 2 inches. Okay, so this is 2 inches here. So I'll be subtracting 2 inches from 7.5 inch, which is the total length of our shoulder measurement on fold. So 7.5 minus 2, we have 5.5, which is perfect for an off shoulder. Between 5.5 and 6 inches is just fine. Okay, so what I'll simply do here is to extend this line to meet up with the 5.5 inches we have here. So this is 4.5 inches, so I'm going to make it up on the other side of the dart leg. Okay, so what we have left is 1 inch. Okay, so I marked 1 inch there. Okay, and I squared it up. Okay, and so this is it here. So we have our over bust tightening well established over here. So what we'll simply do is to place our horizontal measurements after establishing the over bust and under bust darts. Okay, so on the chest line we have a dart intake there of 0.25, so I'll go ahead and place it there. Quarter of my bust circumference is 9 inches, so 9.5 inches there. I'm going to mark it there, and also as well mark the under bust, quarter of my under bust and quarter of my waist circumference. Okay, and then I'll link up the lines together. Okay, so I'm going to connect this point to this point. Okay guys, so having done that, I'll simply go ahead to establish the armhole. Okay, so I'm going to be using the slightly curvy part of my pattern master, not too curvy, not too deep, to link up the points together. Okay, so this is it. This is the armhole of this pattern. Okay, so what we'll simply do next is to place our seam allowance. Okay, have in mind that what we established previously was just the body measurement. Okay, so go ahead and place our seam allowance. Okay, the dart intake plus your seam allowance on the bust line, or on the chest line rather, and then the dart intake plus your seam allowance on the waistline. So have in mind that the dart intake for the waistline is 2 inches, and then the seam allowance is 1 inch. Okay, so I'm going to be marking 3 inches there, and then I'll connect the points together as shown here. So guys, this is it. I'll simply go ahead and just blend this up like so. Okay, so having done this, we'll go ahead to cut out the pattern, and then we'll simply move over to drafting the back pattern. Okay, so guys, for the back pattern, as we all know, this is the zip allowance. Okay, so I'll also like to highlight that I'll be dropping the link on how to draft the basic bodice. Okay, that's the starting point, but I'll simply explain in such a way that you can also comprehend. But understanding how to draft a basic block is very important. Okay, so this is the midpoint of our shoulder seam, and then this is the half bust span line for the back pattern. Okay, so what we'll simply do is to establish our waist dart. Okay, so on the waistline down there, I'll simply move towards the side and center front by half an inch. So the back pattern is not a very difficult thing to do. Okay, and then on the chest line, I'll come down by 1 inch. So I'm establishing the waist dart. Down there is the waistline, like I mentioned earlier. I'll be moving towards the side and center front by half an inch, and then I will link up the those points there together. So I'm linking up the points on the waistline to the chest line. Okay, so having done this, I'll go ahead to take the horizontal measurement. Okay, so this is all for the dart intake, but before that, I'll also establish the off shoulder like I did for the front pattern. So I came down by 4 inches, just like I did for the front pattern, and then I'll go ahead to square it up to the center front. Okay, so I'll be using the set square on my pattern master to do that for accuracy. So I'll just square this up. Okay, so if we understand the calculation I did earlier, I'll be taking the measurements on that line there, and then I'll make it up on the other side. Okay, so I'll make it up to 5.5 inches on the other side. So it must be the same. The front and the back of shoulder must be the same. Okay, so I'll take my horizontal measurement to enable me establish the armhole. So I'll place the quarter of my bust circumference there, and then I'll use the curvy part of my pattern master, the slightly curvy part, to create the armhole, as you can see me doing. Okay, yeah, so I'm placing the seam allowance as well. So the seam allowance for the back pattern is 1 inch as well. So I'll simply go ahead and also place the quarter of my waist circumference on the waistline plus the seam allowance. But I'm linking this up first. Okay, and then I'll place the seam allowance down there by 1 inch, and then I'll link up the seam allowance together. Okay, so 1 inch plus the dart intake of 1 inch, making it 2 inches. Okay, for the waistline, and then I connected the 2 points together. I hope we understand. Okay, so having done this, I'll go ahead to cut out the excess pattern paper, and then we can proceed from there. Okay, so have in mind that I said that intake on the waistline plus the seam allowance, you can see it's a little bit wider than the seam allowance on the chest line. So guys, closing up our dart, that is joining the front panel. I'm talking about placing this part this way, like so. You can see that it's very proportional. Okay, the lines are well matched. Okay, and this is how it should be on your fabric, and that's why there's need to notch your points, the relevant points, okay, so that you don't have any issues. And by the time you start noticing excesses above or below, just know that you've actually missed something. So you should be very careful joining your panels together. And also the armhole, okay, when cutting this on your fabric, try to, blend it properly. Let it be like a curve with seam allowance where necessary, okay? So that is it for that part. And again, one more thing I need to elaborate on is the bust curve. Okay, your dart intake varies for different bust sizes. For smaller bust size, you could actually reduce your dart intake, that is below 35, from 30 to 35. You could reduce it. And for plus sizes rather, you can actually increase your dart intake. You could also use the dart manipulation method to increase the dart intake. In a situation where you on your pattern you have your bust dart, you could close it up. Even after doing a dart intake of 2 inches, you could close up your bust dart, thereby making your curve more elaborate. Okay, I don't know if you can understand. I'm just referring to having a bust dart, okay, on your pattern, and then closing it up, transferring your bust dart to the overbust there. It kind of creates more curve, okay? It kind of extends the curve to become wider, okay? So by the time you join the panels together, you kind of notice that the cup is very, very more elaborate than it should be. Okay guys, so this is it, the little explanation I thought I should add up in this tutorial. Okay, so guys, thank you so much, for watching. Please don't forget to hit on that red subscribe button and then on the notification bell as well. Okay, this will enable me make more videos. Okay, so see you guys in my next sewing tutorial. Have a blessed and a wonderful week ahead. Bye.